So, good afternoon students. Today we are going to discuss about the continuation of your respiration unit, that is the exchange of gases and transport of gases, regulation of respiration, problems in oxygen transport, disorders of respiratory system, effect of smoking. So, possible you will cover all the topics. If any topics which has been omitted by the end of this session, we will discuss that later on, next classes. Okay. Now we'll move on to the exchange of gases. So, when you come to this exchange of gases, the primary site for the exchange of gas is alveoli. So, alveoli is the primary site for the exchange of gases. Okay. So, the uptake of oxygen and release of carbon dioxide, it usually occurs between the blood and the tissues. Okay. So, if you take the exchange of gases, it usually takes place between the alveolar tissues, and the blood. Or if you take the exchange of gases in the case of tissue level, there also it takes place between the body tissue as well as the peripheral blood. So, the site for exchange of gases is only in the alveoli. In the alveoli, there is an exchange of gases between the blood and the tissues. And this exchange usually takes place by means of simple diffusion. So, by means of a simple diffusion, there will be an exchange of gases. And the simple diffusion is usually takes place by means of, what is meant by simple diffusion? It is a movement of substances from higher concentration to the lower concentration. Here, the movement of substances is usually driven, or it is usually been carried out by partial pressure gradient of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, there will be a gradient. Gradient means difference. So, there will be a difference in the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and as a result of which the simple diffusion will takes place. Okay. So, first you should know what is meant by partial pressure. It is a pressure that is contributed by the individual gases in the mixture. So, pressure contributed by the individual gases in the mixture is called as a partial pressure. Okay. So, when you come to this partial pressure, they usually represent this PO2 as a partial pressure for oxygen, and they usually say PCO2, and there is a partial pressure for symbol for carbon dioxide. Okay. So, when you come to this alveoli, you see the partial pressure of alveoli, how the exchange is, the site of the exchange of gases, the primary site for the exchange of gases is alveoli. So, now we will see how the exchange of gases takes place in the alveoli. Okay. So, when you see there is the partial pressure that is seen in the alveoli, you see the partial pressure of oxygen PO2 in the alveoli is how much it is? It is 104, whereas the partial pressure of the oxygen in the blood is only 40 mm Hg. So, you will be having a higher partial pressure in the alveoli, whereas you will be having lower partial pressure of oxygen in the blood vessels. As a result, the diffusion will be takes place from higher to lower. So, as a result, the oxygen will move from the lungs alveoli into the blood. Okay, because alveoli is having a 104 mm of Hg of partial pressure of oxygen. So, higher oxygen is there. So, movement of oxygen takes place from the alveoli tissue into the blood usually takes place. Okay. Next, so one of your gases, this oxygen is diffused by means of this concentration gradient. What about carbon dioxide? When you see this carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide that is able to enter or able to the carbon dioxide is present in the the pulmonary vein, the pulmonary artery. Okay, you see here it is a 45 mm of Hg, the carbon dioxide. Whereas if you look at the carbon dioxide of your alveolar tissue, it is only 40 mm Hg. So, carbon dioxide here in the pulmonary artery is higher than that of your alveolar tissue. So, there will be movement of there will be a diffusion of the carbon dioxide gases from the blood vessel into the alveoli takes place. So, in this way, the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide will diffuse between the alveolar tissue and the blood. Okay, based on the concentration gradient. Okay. Now, when you come to these tissues, for example, the tissue that if you see here, the oxygenated blood that is carrying more amount of high amount of partial pressure of oxygen, you see here 95 mm of Hg is present. So, here you will be having higher partial pressure of oxygen, whereas in the case of tissue you have only lower amount of partial pressure of oxygen, that is 40 mm Hg. So there will be movement of oxygen from the blood into the tissue usually takes place. And when you see the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, it is 45 mm of Hg, whereas here the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is only 40. So there will be movement of carbon dioxide from the tissue into the arteries usually will takes place. So in this way, the diffusion of gases between the tissue and the blood vessel usually takes place. So this way the exchange of gases usually takes place. So next we move on to the respiratory pigment. So the respiratory pigment which is present in the RBC is a hemoglobin. As the name indicates, it consists of heme, that is iron part, and a protein part, that is globulin part. The protein part is usually present more in number, whereas the iron part will constitute only about the 4% of your hemoglobin. Okay, the protein part is mainly comes under the class histone protein. Okay. So now, if you look at this hemoglobin, only this hemoglobin is having a molecular weight of about 68 daltons. It's having a molecular weight of about 68 daltons. And if you look at this hemoglobin, it usually consists of, as the name indicates, heme, that is iron. It usually consists of 4 number of ions, and each and every ion is able to combine with a single molecule of oxygen. So it can able to combine. It is having 4 number of ion atom, so it can able to combine with 4 molecules of molecular oxygen. So totally, each and every hemoglobin carries 4 number of molecular oxygen. Next, then what is called as a what is meant by met hemoglobin? Met hemoglobin means what? Normally, when a hemoglobin it is able to bind to the oxygen, it should be present in a reduced form, that is called as a ferrous state. But when a hemoglobin is been get oxidized, then it is called as a ferric state. So the oxidized form of hemoglobin, that is in the ferric state, is called as a met hemoglobin. These met hemoglobin normally will not bind to oxygen, so it can't able to carry or transport the oxygen. Okay. So next we will move on to transport of gases. So how the gases are usually being transported. So here the transport of gases, we are going to deal with the 2 headings. One is called as a transport of oxygen, another is called as a transport of carbon dioxide. So once your molecular oxygen is carried in the blood, so first we will see about how the molecular oxygen will be get transported. Okay. So when first the molecular oxygen will usually be transported by means of 2 ways. One is it will bind to hemoglobin of your red blood cells, and the another way is this oxygen will be dissolved in the plasma. So when you are able to do inspiration, oxygen will be entering into your lungs. Okay. So from the lungs, the oxygen will be transported to all parts of your body by means of 2 ways. One is it will bind to the hemoglobin and it forms oxyhemoglobin. Okay, that is one way. Another way is it can be dissolved in the plasma and it can be transported. So this is the 2 important ways by which the oxygen will be transported. But when it is the binding of hemoglobin, the transport of the dissolving property of this oxygen in plasma is very, very less. So only 3% of oxygen will be transported in the dissolved form, especially by means of plasma, because the oxygen will be because the dissolving property of oxygen is very, very low. As a result, the transport of oxygen through plasma, okay, in a dissolved form is only 3%. So remaining 95% of our oxygen which you have inhaled is transported only by means of your hemoglobin bound form. Okay. So next we will move on to what is meant by oxyhemoglobin. So we already discussed 97% of oxygen is transported only by binding the hemoglobin. When a hemoglobin bind with the oxygen and it forms a structure called the oxyhemoglobin. Simply we can just name it as a HbO2. Hb is a hemoglobin. So HbO2 means it is a bound form of a hemoglobin with the oxygen. So it is called as HbO2. Okay, next. So now they are going to see the rate at which the hemoglobin binds with the oxygen is usually regulated by partial pressure of oxygen. So the binding of this hemoglobin binding of this oxygen to the hemoglobin is usually regulated by the amount of the oxygen that is present, that is the presence of the partial pressure of oxygen. Okay. if you are having a higher amount of partial pressure of oxygen, there will be higher binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin. If you have a lower amount of oxygen or partial pressure, then it will bind only to lower amount to the hemoglobin. So the formation of oxyhemoglobin is usually being regulated by the presence of this oxygen or by the presence of this partial pressure of oxygen. Okay. So now we will see how the binding will be taking place in the alveoli as well as in the tissues of your body. In the alveoli, there will be a high PO2, low PCO2, low temperature and less hydrogen content. So if you come to this alveoli, you will be having higher amount of oxygen in the alveoli lungs. You will be having lower amount of carbon dioxide, and the temperature will be very low in the alveoli of your lungs, and you will be having a less pH or less hydrogen ion concentration, not less pH, you will have a less hydrogen ion concentration. So, okay, so all these will favor the binding of the oxygen to the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Okay, this is a very important thing you have to remember. When you come to this tissue level, when the oxygen is being formed, oxyhemoglobin is formed and is transported now in the blood and is now about to transported, and it is to be the oxygen will be dissolved, okay, to transport the oxygen to the tissues. In the tissues, what is the condition that is helpful for the dissolving of this oxyhemoglobin? In the tissue, you will be having high amount of carbon dioxide, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, low amount of oxygen will be there, and high hydrogen ion concentration and high temperature, high hydrogen ion concentration, high amount of carbon dioxide, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and low amount of partial pressure of oxygen. All these will be prevailing in the tissue. So as a result, the oxyhemoglobin will dissolve, it will dissociate, and it forms a hemoglobin and oxygen, and this oxygen will be transferred to the tissues or cells. So in this way, these are other factors that is favoring the formation of oxyhemoglobin as well as the dissolution of the oxyhemoglobin. Okay. Next, they have discussed a curve called as a sigmoid curve, or this is called as a oxygen dissociation curve. What is meant by oxygen dissociation curve? So in this, how this curve is formed, so they generally, a curve is usually been plotted by taking the partial pressure of oxygen, okay, under the x-axis, and then the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen under the y-axis. Okay, when a graph is being plotted, you may be able to get a S-shaped sigmoid curve. Okay, so this X-shaped sigmoid curve that is formed because of the plotting of the partial pressure of oxygen with respect to the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. Okay, this curve is called as a oxygen dissociation curve. So in this curve, you see here you have a S-shaped structure here. Okay, here are you can see from this, you can able to see at the values between 10 and 50. At the values between 10 and 50, you will be having a steep slope here. You will be having a flattened, you will be having a steep slopes here. Okay, these steep slopes at the value of 10 and at the value of 50 clearly indicate that there is a high amount of oxygen that is capable of binding to this hemoglobin. Okay, similarly, if you see the values between 70 and above the 70, 100 and all, the curve is very steep. So that clearly indicates that the binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is not taking place, or it is very, very slow, or the dissociation of hemoglobin with oxygen takes place. Whereas the higher binding usually takes place only up to the 60 level. Okay, up to the 60 level, there will be a higher amount of binding of oxygen to hemoglobin takes place. So this is, apart from this, you can able to see the effect of the carbon dioxide, temperature and pH with respect to this binding of oxyhemoglobin, binding of this oxygen with hemoglobin. Okay, this using this oxygen dissociation curve, we can able to see the effect of the temperature and carbon dioxide at the partial pressure of carbon dioxide as well as pH. Okay, all this effect of these particular factors with respect to the binding of oxygen and the hemoglobin. So all this can be studied by using this oxygen dissociation curve. Okay, under normal physiological conditions, every 100 ml of your oxygenated blood usually carries about 5 ml of your oxygen. Under normal conditions, 100 ml of blood, it is capable of transporting 5 ml of your oxygen into the tissues. Okay, so that's all about your transport of oxygen. So under transport of oxygen, two ways it is taking place. One is by bound form to hemoglobin, another one is in a dissolved form. In dissolved form, mainly 3% only it will takes place. Only most of the oxygen will be transported only in the bound form, especially in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, next, transport of carbon dioxide. So blood usually transport carbon dioxide from tissue cells to the lungs by 3 ways. So there are carbon dioxide is transported by means of 3 ways. What are all they? Number one is you have discussed already that in bound form with hemoglobin, 97% of oxygen is transported. Whereas in case of carbon dioxide, the another gas, only 20 to 25% of your carbon dioxide will be transported by binding the hemoglobin. Okay, when a carbon dioxide is able to bound to the hemoglobin, especially it will bound to the amine group of your hemoglobin, and it forms carbamino hemoglobin, HbCO2. Okay, so even carbon dioxide can also be transported by binding to the hemoglobin, but only 20 to 25%. Whereas in case of oxygen, it is 97%. The another form by which the CO2 is transported from the tissues to the alveoli lungs is only by means of dissolved in the plasma. Only 7 to 10% the carbon dioxide will be dissolved in the plasma and it will be transported. When you compare the dissolving property of oxygen with carbon dioxide, oxygen will be dissolving very, very low. The dissolving property of oxygen in the plasma is very low, whereas carbon dioxide, the dissolving property of carbon dioxide is slightly higher. So 7 to 10% of carbon dioxide will be transported through dissolving in the plasma. So remaining mainly 70% of your carbon dioxide is usually transported in the form of bicarbonate ions. So by only through these bicarbonate ions, 70% of your carbon dioxide will be get transported in the blood. Okay, now what are the factors that is influencing the binding of this particular carbon dioxide to the hemoglobin? What are the factors mainly it is influencing? Number one is the presence of partial pressure of carbon dioxide and the degree of hemoglobin oxygenation. So the presence of the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is higher, there will be higher formation of carbaminohemoglobin, and at the same time the degree of hemoglobin oxygenation. If the degree of hemoglobin oxygenation is more, then the binding or the formation of the carbaminohemoglobin will be very less. Or if the binding of the hemoglobin to the oxygen is very less, then there will be higher binding of the carbon dioxide to the hemoglobin will be more. Okay, this is the important factors that is influencing the binding of the carbon dioxide to the hemoglobin. Okay, normally if you look at this one, RBC, now we are going to discuss about how this 70% of this carbon dioxide has been transported by means of in the form of bicarbonates. Normally RBC is having a high concentration of an enzyme called as a carbonic anhydrase. So this is an enzyme that is present more inside the RBC than in the plasma. So this enzyme is present more inside the red blood cells, but it is present very low amount in the blood plasma. So that's the information they are giving it. So what is the role of this enzyme? For example, in the tissue, okay, you see here, you can see this from your diagram. Okay, so I think they didn't have any diagram in this. Okay, if you look at this diagram, if you see how this particular binding of carbon dioxide into the red blood cells usually takes place. Okay, first thing is that first the carbon dioxide which is produced from the tissues, it usually binds with the water. So it first enters carbon dioxide first, which is produced from the cell in a high amount. It usually diffuses into the blood and it enters the red blood cells, and inside the red blood cells this carbon dioxide will bind with water and it forms carbonic acid. It forms this carbonic acid, and this reaction is usually catalyzed by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase. This is the first step in the formation of your bicarbonate of your carbon dioxide. So first carbon dioxide which is formed in the tissue in high amount will be entering into the blood, and it is again entering or diffuses into the red blood cell, and inside the red blood cell it binds with the water and it forms a carbonic acid, and this binding of this carbon dioxide and water to form carbonic acid is usually been favored by an enzyme called as a carbonic anhydrase. So then what will happen? This enzyme carbonic anhydrase is present more in the red blood cell, so it will carry these reactions. This carbonic acid is unstable, and it will be able to dissociate, and it forms a hydrogen plus ion as well as bicarbonate. So this HCO3 is called as a bicarbonate. So most of your carbon dioxide produced from the tissue, okay, is transported from the tissue to the alveoli only by means of this bicarbonate form. So now the bicarbonate which is formed in the red blood cell now will move on quickly to the plasma. It will move from the red blood cells to the plasma. Plasma is a fluid part of your blood. Okay, from the cell it is moving to the fluid part of the plasma, and it usually carrying this bicarbonate into the lungs. Since more amount of bicarbonates is been released from the RBC or diffuses from the RBC into the plasma, in order to compensate these bicarbonate ions, more amount of chlorine ions will be moving inside the red blood cells. More amount of chlorine ion will be shifting inside the cell, okay, in order to compensate the loss of these bicarbonate ions. So this is called as a chlorine shift. Okay, now these bicarbonates, when it is able to reach the alveolar tissues, now what will happen? These bicarbonate will be again entering into the again from the plasma, it is entering into the red blood cells. Again these bicarbonates will combine with the proton, and it forms a carbonic acid, because it is a reversible reaction. Again it forms a carbonic acid. From the carbonic acid, again the carbon dioxide and water will be the dissociation of this carbonic acid into carbon dioxide and water takes place, and these carbon dioxide will be entering into the alveoli. Okay, it will be entering from the blood plasma into the alveoli. So in this way, at the site of tissue, the carbon dioxide will be transported. At the site of tissue, the carbon dioxide will be converted into bicarbonates, and it will be transported in the plasma as a bicarbonate, and once it reaches the alveoli of your lungs, again this bicarbonate will dissociate to form carbon dioxide and water, and it will be diffuses into the alveoli tissue. So in this way, the transport of this carbon dioxide usually takes place by means of in the form of bicarbonate ions. I also discussed a part called as what is meant by chlorine shift. What is meant by chlorine shift? So there will be the compensation of this. Once the bicarbonate is able to move, once it is formed, in the RBC, so and it is released into the plasma, and it is transported into the alveoli. So more amount of bicarbonate, since it is released from the red blood cell, there will be an ionic imbalance will takes place. So more amount of chlorine from the plasma will dissolve inside the red blood cells in order to compensate that particular loss of your bicarbonates. So this shift of chlorine from the plasma into the red blood cell is called as a chlorine shift. That is what they are trying to say here. So that's all about your transport of your what is that? Gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen. Okay. Next is the regulation of your respiration. A specialized respiratory centers are present in the medulla oblongata of your hindbrain. Okay, a specialized respiratory centers that are present in the medulla oblongata of your hindbrain, and this is called as a respiratory rhythm center. So respiratory rhythm center is usually present in the medulla oblongata. So this is the main center that is responsible for the regulation of your respiration. Okay, so how it is regulating the respiration? Okay, first you will see here there is a chemosensitive area. The chemosensitive area is found very close to the respiratory rhythm center. Okay, chemocentric area is the area that is found very close to the respiratory rhythm center. This center will try to sense the amount of carbon dioxide and the H plus ion concentration. It is highly sensitive. These chemosensitive areas are found in the what is that? It is mainly found in the carotid artery. It is also found in the aortic artery. Okay, all these arteries, okay, they are having the receptors, as well as this chemosensitive area is also found very close to the respiratory rhythm center. Okay, when there is a high amount of carbon dioxide or when there is a high amount of partial CO2 and high amount of H plus ions in the arteries, then these what is that? Then these particular respiratory rhythm center as well as these receptors will be get activated. Okay, these activated, what will happen? It will send a signal or it will send a nerve impulses or a signal to the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. So, it will send a signal to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles which are present in the lungs, and it will allow this diaphragm and the intercostal muscles to undergo a rapid breathing. So, it increases the breathing rate or it increases the inspiration and the expiration. As a result, more amount of CO2 which is present in your blood, it will be released outside from the blood into the external atmosphere. In this way, this respiratory rhythm center as well as these receptors which is present in the carotid and the aortic arch or the aortic artery will control the or regulate the excess amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. Okay, what will happen if there is a low amount of carbon dioxide in the blood? Then there is a center called as a pneumotactic center. This center which is present in the pons varolii, it will control the respiratory rhythm center. Okay, how it is controlling? When there is a low amount of carbon dioxide, then what will happen? This pneumotactic center which will control the what is that? This pneumotactic center is present in the pons varolii or it is present in the pons. This region will control the respiratory rhythm center that is present in the what is that? Your medulla oblongata, and it is switch off this particular respiratory or it is mainly switch off the inspiration process. If more amount of what is that? Oxygen is present, okay, or then what will happen? We don't want more amount of oxygen to be present, but in that case, what will happen? This pneumotactic center will be present. It will switch off the inspiration process just by controlling the respiratory rhythm center. So, when it is able to send or send a signal to the respiratory rhythm center, it is able to, in a negative way, it will control the increasing amount of inspiration. So, in this way, the regulation of your respiration usually takes place. Is it clear? So, mainly it is being controlled by means of two centers. Positive way it is controlled by respiratory rhythm center, and negative way it is controlled by pneumotactic centers. And this respiratory rhythm center is usually under the control of pneumotactic center, and this respiratory rhythm center controls by means of two ways. One is by chemosensitive area and as well as by the receptors that is present in the blood vessels or in the arteries. So, how normally when there is a high amount of carbon dioxide and high amount of H plus ions, then the respiratory rhythm center will send a signal to the diaphragm as well as to the intercostal muscles and makes the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles to get relaxed. So, it will not able to undergo more contraction, it will be in a relaxed state. As a result, more amount of CO2 will be released outside, it will be in an expiration form. Okay. So, and it also lowers the hydrogen concentration. So, in this way it is able to control the regulation of your respiration. So, what are the various problems that are seen in the oxygen transport? Okay. When a person is able to quickly travels from higher sea level, okay, when a person is able to quickly travel from sea level to an elevation of about 8,000 feet. From the sea level, if he is able to move to an elevation of about 8,000 feet, what will happen? There will be a less amount of atmospheric pressure and the partial pressure. The partial pressure and the atmospheric pressure will be very, very less when you just go above the sea level. So, as a result, what will happen? The person who is able to be present at that particular area will develop a symptom, and it is called as a acute mountain sickness. In short form, they call it as a AMS. Okay, acute mountain sickness. So, this is a sickness that usually occur in an individual who is able to climb the Mount Everest or something, any mountain that is about 8,000 feet above from the sea level. So, because of these AMS symptoms, you may be able to get headache, shortness of breath, nausea, that is a vomiting sensation, dizziness due to the poor binding of oxygen. Okay, poor binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin. Because the atmospheric pressure is very low, so as well as the oxygen content also will be very, very low. Okay, so what will happen, since the oxygen content is very less, the binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin will be very low. Okay, as a result, you may be able to get all these symptoms. Okay, so but this is a temporary time. Once you are able to climb, you may be able to get the sickness. But when a person is keep on moving in the mountain and he has been there for a long time, then the particular modification or adaptation usually takes place in his body. What is the modification, adaptations? How he is adapting to that particular situation? When a person is moving on a long-term basis to the mountains from the sea level, the body will begin to make a respiratory and a hematopoietic adjustments. Now the person will be able to undergo some respiratory and hematopoietic adjustments. What is that respiratory hematopoietic adjustments? The kidney will able to produce an hormone called erythropoietin. So kidney will produce an hormone called erythropoietin. This erythropoietin hormone will stimulate the bone marrow to produce more amount of RBC. So kidney will try to produce an hormone called erythropoietin. This hormone will bind to the bone marrow and it will allow the secretion of more and it will allow the synthesis of more amount of red blood cells. So, so there will be more amount of red blood cells will be produced. So though the mountain is having only low amount of oxygen, but the number of RBC to bind to that oxygen will be more in number. So more the higher the number of RBC, it will bind to the maximum amount of oxygen. It will bind to the complete available oxygen. It will completely bind to the whatever the oxygen that is present in that particular mountain level, and it will try to meet the oxygen deficient which is present in that AMS symptom. So one way is though the oxygen level is very low, but it will completely replace all the oxygen by producing more amount of red blood cells, and the more amount of red blood cells is produced by the stimulation of the erythropoietin hormone on bone marrow. In this way, the person will be able to make an adjustment with respect to the respiratory and the hematopoietic manner. Okay, next we will see when a person is moving to a higher mountain, his body is able to undergo these respiratory and hematopoietic adjustments. What will happen if a person is able to descend deep into the sea? When a person is descend deep into the sea, what will happen? The pressure surrounding the water will be high. When you go higher into the mountain, the atmospheric pressure is very less. When you go deep into the sea, the atmospheric pressure will be more. So what will happen when atmospheric pressure is very more? So here, it causes the lungs to decrease in volume. So the lungs will be undergo a decrease in its volume when a person is descending deep into the sea. This increases the partial pressure of gases within the lungs. So the partial pressure of gas within the lungs will be increased because the lungs is able to undergo decrease in the volume, so that the pressure of the oxygen will be increased, or the pressure of the gases within the lungs will be increased. Okay, so as a result, this will be beneficial, and it tends to this increase in the pressure in the lungs will be beneficial, and it helps to drive or intake more additional oxygen from the external atmosphere into the circulation. Okay, that is one of the benefits of your high atmospheric pressure in the sea. But what is the disadvantages is here, the increased pressure can also drive more amount of nitrogen gas into the circulation. The water is having, when a person is inside the water, the nitrogen gas also will be present along with the oxygen gas. Only the oxygen gas is able to enter, no problem. Along with that, the nitrogen gases will also be entering inside the persons. Okay, and it will be mixing in the person's blood circulation. Okay, so this increase in the nitrogen content in the blood of and the circulation of a person, it causes a condition called the nitrogen narcosis. Okay, so this condition will be usually occur in a person who is able to descend deep into the sea. When the diver ascends to the surface too quickly to a condition called a bends or decompression sickness will occur. So when a person immediately when it comes back to the surface quickly, after when he is descending deep into the sea, when it comes quickly back into the sea, okay, they able to undergo a condition called a bends or decompression sickness. He may able to come across this particular symptoms, bends or decompression sickness will occur. So what is happening during this bends or decompression sickness? Nitrogen will be coming out of a solution while still in the blood forming bubbles. Most of the nitrogen which is being entering into the circulation will be coming out, but still small amount of nitrogen will be present inside the circulation, and it will be able to form small bubbles. Small bubbles will not be harmful. When a small bubble is formed during this bends or decompression sickness, it won't be harmful. But if the bubbles are larger, it will try to clog or it will try to lodge the small capillaries. Okay, as a result, it will block the flow of blood. Okay, or even press the nerve endings. So when a flow of blood or everything else has been get stopped, no, this will leads to a decompression sickness. Okay, it is mainly causing a pain in joints. These particular decompression sickness, when it is able to block these particular small capillaries by forming these nitrogen bubbles, it will causes pains in joints and muscles, and it also leads to various neurological problems, including the stroke. Okay, so the risk of nitrogen narcosis and bends is common in scuba divers. Mainly in scuba divers, such type of these decompression sicknesses are generally common. So this is what they are trying to say here. So it is better to avoid going deep into the sea often, so that you can able to avoid this particular type of decompression sickness or bends. So that's all about the problems that is associated with your oxygen transport. Next we'll move on to the disorders of your respiratory system. So what is meant by disorders of respiratory system? The respiratory systems are generally affected by environmental, occupational, personal and social factors. So all these factors, these factors are responsible for a number of respiratory disorders. Personal factor, environmental factor, occupational factor and social factors. All these factors are able to form a number of respiratory disorders. Okay, so what are the disorders that is been formed because of this factor? That is called as the disorders of respiratory systems. We are going to see some 4 or 5 respiratory disorders. First disorder what we are going to discuss is asthma. So what is meant by asthma? It is an important respiratory disorders which is commonly seen in the peoples. It is usually characterized by narrowing and inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. You know that bronchi and bronchioles, they are the respiratory tract structures. These bronchi and bronchioles normally will be wider, but because of the secretion of more mucus and inflammation, this diameter of this bronchi and bronchioles will be very much reduced. Okay, so it becomes very narrow. So narrowing of the bronchi and bronchioles will be takes place. Since the bronchi and bronchioles are getting narrowing, the exchange of gases will not be proper, so he will be feeling difficult in breathing. Okay, so this is the main symptom that is mainly associated with the asthma. So how you are able to get this asthma? Because of a lot of allergens, okay, like dust, drug, pollen grain and certain food items like fish, prawn, certain fruits. All these are the food items and dust that is mainly common cause for your asthma. So how to avoid this one? You should try to avoid this going into an area where you may have more amount of dust, and you should avoid the food that is able to cause allergic to you, or that is causing asthma to you. So you should generally be away from the allergens, so that you can able to prevent this one of the respiratory disorder, asthma. Second disorder is the emphysema. This is another respiratory disorders. So what is meant by emphysema? It is a widening of your alveoli. Normally the alveoli will be in a very condensed form, So when you are able to get this emphysema, the walls of the alveoli will be break down. As a result, there will be widening of your alveoli. So widening of alveoli is called as a emphysema. So the major cause of this disease is mainly by cigarette smoking. So this cigarette smoking will reduce the respiratory surface of your alveoli walls, and it results in a condition called as a emphysema. So please try to avoid the cigarette. Next, bronchitis. So what is meant by bronchitis? As the name indicates, TIS, that means inflammation. So there is an inflammation in bronchi, so it is called as a bronchitis. So here the bronchi, which is a continuation of your trachea, these bronchi will be inflated. It means it will become more widened, and due to this pollution smokes and the cigarette smoking. Because of this pollution smoke as well as cigarette smoking, you may be able to get the widening of this bronchi, and it is called as a bronchitis. Here when you get able to get bronchitis, you may be able to get cough, shortness of breath and sputum in the lungs. So this is the main symptoms that you are able to see. You may be able to get more amount of cough, sputum in the lungs and shortness of breath. All these are the characteristic features of bronchitis. Okay, so we have discussed about asthma and bronchitis. Next is pneumonia. So what is pneumonia? It is a inflammation that is seen in the lungs. Pneumo means lungs. Okay, it is an inflammation that is seen in the lungs due to the infection caused by virus or bacteria. Because of bacterial or viral infections, you may be able to get the disease pneumonia. Okay, common symptoms of this pneumonia, it mainly includes sputum production. So more amount of sputums will be produced in the lungs. Nasal congestion, and the nasal congestion is what? So the tract from the nose to the trachea, bronchi, bronchiole, all this will be get blocked because of this sputum. That is called as a nasal congestion. Shortness of breath and sore throat. So you will be not having a deep breath. You may feel difficult in breathing. That is shortness of breath and sore throat. These are the symptoms of your pneumonia. Okay. Another important disease caused by microorganisms is tuberculosis. It is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. This is a bacteria that is causing the disease called as a tuberculosis. Here the infection is mainly occur in the lungs as well as in the bones. So this is also another lung disease, pneumonia and tuberculosis. So you may able to get a fluid. A collection of fluid is usually seen between the lungs and the chest wall. When what is the main symptoms of this tuberculosis? You may able to get the formation of or the collection of fluid between the lungs and the chest wall. It is the main complication of this tuberculosis disease. Is it clear? So that's all about your tuberculosis disease. Next is occupational respiratory disorders. What is meant by occupational respiratory disorders? It's a disorders, the respiratory disorder that you are able to acquire because of the occupation, because of the working environment. So only we call this as occupational respiratory disorders. Okay. So what are the working area where you may able to get such type of this disease? When you are able to work in industries like grinding or stone breaking industry, construction sites, cotton industries, etc. So when you are able to work all in this particular, when you are having such type of occupations, you may be able to get this type of disorders. Okay. So during these particular working in the industries, you may be able to get a lot of dust. So the dust produced during these particular occupations are able to affect the respiratory tract, upper and lower respiratory tracts, and it results in this disorder. Okay. For example, mainly long exposure of the your respiratory tract to silica as well as to the asbestos. Okay, it causes the disease called silicosis and asbestosis. So this is the best example of your occupational respiratory disorders. Okay. So next we will move on to that's all about your disorders of your respirations. Next we will move on to the effect of smoking. Okay. So what is the effect of smoking that you are able to get it? What is the effect of smoking you are able to get? When you keep on able to go for smoking, what are the complications that you are able to get it because of smoking? That is what we are going to discuss in this slide. So when you are able to, nowadays the youngsters are very curious and they are just started as a habitual for smoking. But once they are able to take just as an adventure and they are trying to start smoking, then it becomes a habit. They will become addicted to that, and then they can't able to avoid this smoking. So in this way, this smoking character starts in an individual. How to avoid? Research usually says that 80% of lung cancer is mainly due to cigarette smoking. Okay. So what are the problems that you are going to occur because of this cigarette smoking? So that is what we are going to discuss in the effect of this smoking. So smoking is the inhaling of this smoke from the burning tobacco. When you are able to inhale the smoke from the burning tobacco, it is called as a smoking. So there are thousands of chemicals are present in that particular inhaled smoke. What are all they? Nicotine, tar, carbon monoxide, ammonia and sulfur dioxide. And small amount of arsenic are also been present in this particular smoke. So mainly this carbon monoxide and nicotine, it damages the cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular means it is a system that is related to the heart and blood vessels. So it is mainly in these carbon monoxide and nicotine damage the cardiovascular systems. And when you come to this tar mainly damages the gases exchange systems. Gases exchange system is mainly present in the lungs alveoli. Okay. Mainly nicotine is a chemical that is mainly causing the addiction. It causes addiction, and it is mainly acting as a stimulant which makes the hearts to beat faster, and as a result the blood flow will be moving very faster, and there will be a narrowing of blood vessel that takes place. As a result, what will happen? The flowing of blood is very high, so it will be leading to a high blood pressure. There will be high blood pressure and it may lead to coronary heart disease. So mainly carbon monoxide and nicotine, they are mainly acting as a stimulant to the heartbeat, stimulant to the heart, and it will make the heart to beat faster. It increases the blood pressure. As a result, it also able to cause an increase in the BP, and it also causes coronary heart disease. So try to avoid taking smoke, okay, because it will be having these two chemicals, carbon monoxide and nicotine. So what will be the role of this tar and nicotine? Mainly the tar and the nicotine mainly damages the gaseous exchange system in the alveoli. So that is also an important thing which you have to avoid. So presence of carbon monoxide also reduces oxygen supply. Okay, next to that cardiovascular disease, another important disease that you are able to acquire because of the inhale of this smoke or because of the smoking character is lung cancer. Lung cancer, cancer in the mouth and the larynx is the more common in the smokers. So if you are a chain smoker, if you are you are not able to avoid smoking, they will be highly prone to get a disease called lung cancer or mouth cancer or larynx cancer. So this is a common cancer that is usually seen a person who is able to take, who is undergoing, who is becoming a long-term smoker. Smoking also causes cancer not only in the above listed area, it also causes cancer in the stomach, pancreas, bladder, lower sperm count is also seen in the men. The sperm count will also get reduced, so that the ability to reproduce the child will also become very, very low when you are a chain smoker or a long smoker. Smoking causes diseases, lung diseases, and it damages the airway and alveoli, and it results in emphysema and chronic bronchitis. We already discussed what is emphysema. That is widening of your alveoli. That is emphysema. It also causes chronic bronchitis. That is inflammation in the bronchi. Okay. So smoking mainly causes the lung diseases. Not only it causes lung cancer, it also causes lung diseases. Okay. So these emphysema, chronic bronchitis along with asthma, they are collectively called as a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. In short form, it is called as a COPD, COVID. Okay, these emphysema, chronic bronchitis and asthma, they collectively called as a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. Okay, when a person able to smoke, when he is able to smoke and it is able to nearly 85% of smoke is released and it is inhaled by the person who is smoking, but 15% of the smoke which is released by the smoker, okay, is also been inhaled by the others who is very near to the smoker. So the person who is able to inhale the smoke which is being produced by the smoker is called as a passive smoker. So these passive smokers have also been affected, and it accounts only for 15% of your effects of your smoking. So mainly 85% of your smoking and smoking disorders you are able to get only from the smokers are highly prone in compared to that of the non-smokers. But still non-smokers should be keep away from the smokers. Otherwise they also will be affected because of this passive smoking. Okay. So how will you be able to avoid the person who is continuously smoking or a chain smoker? Counseling and guidance and counseling should be done in order to make this persons to get away from this smoking habit. Okay. So far that's all about your respiratory unit. So far in this chapter 6 respiration, we have discussed about what is meant by respiration, what are the how different organs are present in different animals for respiration, right? Then we discussed about what is the anatomy and anatomy of your respiratory system, especially human respiratory systems, and then we have discussed about mechanism of breathing, right? Inspiration, expiration, all those things, and then we have discussed about how the breathing is usually being followed by the exchange of gases between the alveoli and the lungs, between the alveoli and the blood vessels, and between the tissues as well as the blood vessels. Then we have discussed about the transport of gases, especially carbon dioxide and oxygen. Then we discussed the regulation of respirations. Then problems in the oxygen transport, disorders of respiratory system, and the effects of smoking. So that's all about this chapter. The remaining things we will see in the next class. Thank you.